Well, this afternoon, I decided I'm going to tell you a funny story. Now, you got to realize some people are good at telling stories, making them funny. Some are not. We're going to find out if you've got a sense of humor today, and I'm hoping you have, because this is one of the stories I've always loved, and I'm hoping you'll like it too. But first, I want to show you something. I was looking through my junk jewelry, that's the costume jewelry that I use when I'm making shadow boxes and jewelry items. You've seen those when I showed my vintage jewelry to you. So, my nose is itching. So anyway, I was plowing through this box and I saw this little gold chain and pulled it out, and I'm going to show it to you. Well, if I can get hold of it. Here we go. Now I know when I show you this, let's see if I can get it. Okay, right there. I'm going to come a little closer. I want you to see this real good. Put it against me right there. Can you see those little gold beads? Okay. I got to thinking, gee, this looks like a good necklace. It doesn't look like costume jewelry. See those pretty gold beads? And then I remembered, back in the 1980s, this became the thing for young girls and mothers as well. For a birthday, the daughter might get the little gold chain, 14-karat gold chain, and with that gold chain, goodness gracious, these feel like they're stuck. They're on there tight, let's put it that way. See the little gold bead in the middle? It's the one that is the biggest. That's the one she would get first. And then when she'd have another birthday or special occasion, Mom would go to the jewelry store and she'd buy 2 more beads, a little smaller, one on each side of the big bead. And you see? Okay. And birthday, Christmas, Valentine's Day, or maybe even graduation, Mom added more gold beads. These are 14-karat gold beads. When I looked at this, I said, oh my gosh, is that what I've got? This is not a cheap piece of jewelry. This is 14-karat gold beads and chain. And I'm sure many of you remember. You probably even still have one. I never had one myself. I never could afford the fine jewelry. I just had, the kind you buy to match an outfit for a special occasion or something. So anyway, I wanted you to see this necklace, and I keep thinking I'm going to take it to a jeweler's and let him appraise it and tell me if I've got a piece of good jewelry. I'm going to put that aside for the time being. Now, I was living in Tennessee. I lived there 19 years. And my sister lived there. She was 9 years older than me, and we ran around together. Everywhere we went together. And she had a very good friend she'd gone to high school with. The husband liked each other. They were good pals, Anywhere they went together. So I just kind of fell into the group. And so it got to where there were 4 of us. There's nothing like 4 girls getting together, running around together. You never know what's going to happen. So there was my sister Benna, Blessing, Mabel Farmer, and me. Now, Mabel Farmer, she looked like her name. Have you ever heard someone's name and said, she looked like a Mabel Farmer? Her husband was a farmer. She and Blessing both had that Tennessee drawl that would just drive you up the wall. Mabel was one of the driest people I've ever known, but everything she said was funny. So when the four of us got together and we decided to take a little excursion somewhere, sometimes it'd just be for the day, sometimes we'd go to Gatlinburg, to Smokies, and we'd spend the night and roam up and down the street, going from shop to shop, and eating breakfast at the Pancake House was a treat. I'm telling you, the best breakfast you could ever have. So we did things like that together, and there would always be something happen that we would find very funny. Now, on occasion, I would go shopping with Blessing. And every time we went shopping, Blessing wanted to look at the jewelry in the department store. Okay, we'd go to the jewelry counter, and the clerk would get the big case out of gold chain. Now, you remember the phase of gold chain. I think every woman in the state of Tennessee and Kentucky had a gold chain except me. I never owned one. I couldn't afford them. So you had the long ones, you had the short ones, you had the thick ones, whatever. Everybody had one. And finally, for Christmas one year, my son gave me a gold chain for Christmas present. Here's my gold chain right here. I was real curious. I wanted to know how much my gold chain, now mine's a short one. I wanted to know what it was worth, so friend and I went in jewelry store and we're looking, and we want to look at the gold chains, and I'm wearing mine. But I'm so curious to know how much my son paid for this gold chain that I decided to look at some of theirs. And the clerk looked at me and she said, "You've got a good gold chain. Yours is thick." Well, that's all I needed to know. I knew my son had made a good choice and bought me a pretty gold chain. So I, like every other woman in Tennessee and Kentucky, had a gold chain to wear around my neck. Well, every time Blessing and I went shopping, we had to look at gold chains, and she would try them on one after another. There were the long ones, the short ones, like I said before. And she'd say, "What do you think? Which one do you like the best?" And we'd go through those gold chains, but she would never buy one. So one day, there was Blessing and Mabel and me. We were in Knoxville. Knoxville's just 20 miles from where we lived. We were in a department store, and Mabel was off looking at some things, and Blessing said, "Let's look at the jewelry." Oh boy, we're going to look at gold chains again. So the lady get the gold chain case out, and Blessing starts trying them on. "Pat, what do you think? Which one do you think I ought to get?" Well, you can't make a decision like that for somebody else. And I'd say, "Well, Blessing, get the one you like best." Well, Mabel walked up and she says, "Mabel, which one of these chains you think I ought to get?" Mabel, with her dry expression, looked at Blessing and said, "Blessing, What difference does it make? It'll just get lost in the wrinkles in your neck. I had to make a mad run to the ladies' room. That was one of the stories about Blessing. Blessing lived to be in her 90s, and she'd had cancer 2 or 3 times. She'd been a survivor that many times. But when my sister was lying in the funeral home, Blessing was 93 years old, and she came to visit with Benna. There are so many stories that include her and Mabel Farmer. Anything Mabel said, you couldn't help but laugh. We went to festivals once in a while at Rugby, Tennessee. Now, some of you won't be familiar with Rugby. Rugby was a little community started back about 1880. The royalty from Britain, there were so many of them, they couldn't give them all positions in the palace. So they took the lower of the royalty, like Harry, and a lot of the families, and decided to send them to America. And they would settle colonies in America. So one of those colonies was Rugby, Tennessee. They were very successful. It was going to be an agriculture community. The people were going to learn all about agriculture, and they were going to they would eventually have a little city. They had their church. They had a beautiful hotel. Very short time, all these things developed. They ended up with about 300 residents. Everything went fine until there was an episode of typhoid. They lost a number of residents from typhoid. And then things started to go downhill. At first, they even had access to railroad trains. There was a train that would come through that community twice a day, and it came from Cincinnati, Ohio. So that was great for those people because they could travel back and forth, and they could do their business and build their community. So the town died out, everything went downhill, but they continued to keep Rugby as a historic community. We went there several times for little festivals. We sat in the beautiful little church. There were several houses still existed, and there was a big cemetery. We'd taken our picnic lunch with us, and we had the quilt. We had our picnic basket, and we went to the cemetery to eat our lunch, where it would be a little private and not a lot of people around us. And we spread everything out. I even took my plate and set it on top of one of the tombstones. And we started looking at the tombstones. You know how you when you're in a cemetery, you just have that thing about wanting to read the names and the epitaphs on tombstones. And one by one, we were finding the name Frog, Frogg. Tombstone after tombstone, the name Frog. Well, that seemed a little odd to us, that there would be that many residents with the same name. When the day ended, we'd had our lunch, we'd gone through all of the historic homes and the church and the library. Wonderful, wonderful library they had. And at one time they had a gorgeous hotel. There are pictures of it. You can go on the internet and look up Rugby, Tennessee, and historic Rugby, Tennessee, and you can see, get a little history. You might enjoy reading about it, and if you're ever in that part of Tennessee, you might even enjoy driving through and seeing some of those things. So at the end of the day, we're tired, we're ready to go home, and Mabel's driving her new Ford, and we don't have much to say. You know how it is at the end of a day when you've been doing exciting things. You just wear down, and everybody's quiet. Mabel's driving along. We come through a little town called Jamestown, Tennessee. There wasn't much for us to see there, but on the side of a road was a general store, and above the porch, one of those long porches, with the post, and above the door was a great big sign that said Frog General Store. Mabel looked over and she said, "Well, there's one frog that didn't croak. If your mood is right, that's funny." We didn't expect that to come out of Mabel's mouth. But she was as solemn as could be when she said it, and we spent the next 30 minutes of the trip laughing at Mabel. I don't know any quick stories right now. There's several more trips we took. Even they went on one trip down around the Smokies. Now we had learned, Benna, Blessing, and I had learned a year or two before that when you're out running around that way in unknown territory, you better take an emergency kit, because we had an experience, and it's such a long story I won't tell it now, but we had an experience where we got grounded. It was the middle of winter. The temperature had been down in the 20s. It'd been snow on the ground. We were out looking for a log cabin that this man had built, because I was considering building a house with a shop next to it. He was a builder, and my brother-in-law had said, "You need to look at his work." So we were going to a new area that was called Dogwood Shores. It was going to be a resort community, and a few houses had already been built. Nobody was staying there because they weren't ready to move into those houses. It was going to be a summer resort. So we got stranded in mud. This big Chrysler we're in went through an area of mud, and it sunk down to the rim of the car. Now, I won't tell you the rest of that story, but the only emergency kit we had, because my mother was with us, and we were very concerned about her because we were stuck out in the land of nowhere. We couldn't call anybody. We didn't have cell phones then. So the only thing, we'd gone all day. We didn't have anything to eat. And so my mother was in her 80s then, and we were afraid she was going to get nervous and get cold because the temperature was dropping. It had gone up to 40 and it was dropping, and we were wearing windbreaker jackets. Oh my, what a mess. My brother-in-law had walked back to the entrance of the area, hoping he would find someone in a pickup truck or someone coming into the area that would have a CB radio, and he could call AAA and have AAA come and dig us out of that mud. So, while he was gone, Blessing reached in her purse and she pulls out a little, you know, those little boxes of raisins, those little bitty boxes. And she handed us each a raisin. We went round and round till the raisins were gone. That was our emergency kit. Well, to go from that story to the time that she and Benna and Mabel went to Gatlinburg, Mabel was driving her new Ford, her new dependable Ford, and they were out on a country road. And what do you think happened? The car stops. They don't have a clue what's wrong with it, and they don't know how they're going to get back into town where they can get help. That was when they needed an emergency kit, because they might be there all night long waiting for a car or somebody to come along and discover them. They had bought, I think it was a bag of donuts, and they started eating the donuts. They were eating the donuts one after the other, their emergency kit, and they decided they'd eat them all at once. Well, that's that story. But there were other stories that included Mabel and Blessing. And Blessing's gone now. Mabel's gone down now. My sister Benna is gone. She's been gone 6 years. She's the one that looked so much like me. She's the one that went with me on our cruise on the Queen Elizabeth II to England. And there were passengers on the ship that would walk up and ask if we were twins. Now, goodness gracious, I weighed 50 pounds more than she did. I was 9 years younger than she was, and still people thought we looked so much alike that we might be twins. Blessing came to pay her last respects to my sister. And after that, she came down with cancer again. She was in her mid-90s when she passed on. But I always remember how funny she could be. She was one of those people that if the room was full and everybody was talking, you could hear her on the other side of the room. She stood out. She always stood out. And I always remembered Mabel and her new Ford. I remembered Blessing in her 2 sizes too large shirt. And I thought, that isn't the craziest thing I ever heard of. She didn't want to leave any doubt with anybody seeing her in her sizes too large shirts. I never knew anyone like her. She was funny. She was a funny lady. And her stories about Marlowe, one after another. So, I hope you appreciate this little story. It's not one of the funniest ones, but I was just thinking about Blessing and wondering if her mother thought when she was born that she was going to be a blessing to her, and that's why she called her that name. So, anyway, I haven't worn my gold chain in a long time. You don't see people wearing them anymore. It was a fad. But it was an expensive fad. And what to do with my other little necklace? I'm anxious to find out if this is just a piece of costume jewelry or there. Yeah, you can get a little better look at it there. I want to find out if I have finally got one of those necklaces with the 14 karat beads on them. They were called Add a Bead. Now you remember them, don't you? Add a bead. And this is what mothers did for their teenage daughters. And I wonder how many of them are still around. So, that's my story for today. I've had excellent comments on the last story, if I can remember which one it was. I forget real fast. So, you stay with me, you follow me day by day, and now and then I'll come up with a good story, one that'll be just your type. So, thanks so much for being a follower of me. I'm 86, and I have to have a project. And as I said before, you people are my project now. I want to please you as much as I want to please myself. And that last video I did at the end where all you could see was the top of my head, oh my, I've got to get better than that. You know you can do some crazy things when you're got a camera facing you. And it's not always the right thing. But if I can make you laugh, make you smile even, I'm happy. And I hope you are too. So I will see you next time. My clicker's not working.